Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Dimitri Johnson, and you're listening to MMALatestNews.com.
It's time to roll, baby.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to MMA Latest. We're here for the MMA debate. I'm here with Arion and Jay, of course. Guys, how you been? There's been a lot of talk this past week of UFC versus Bellator. Scott Coker came out and said that he's got the best light heavyweight in the world, who then unfortunately went on to get knocked out. Dana White came back and said it's cute. You know, he's giving them their light heavyweight division. First of all, Arion, what do you make of the UFC versus Bellator route? Should there be a crossover? Is there going to be a crossover? And who came out the better on this week, Dana or Scott Coker?
Well, first of all, on the whole debate, I do like those kind of ideas because I just think it's, especially like with the likes of maybe John Jones and stuff, I think there comes a time where you just run out of like legit contenders and maybe doing some sort of a crossover event or just letting him do something different and make his money in a different way or in a different kind of a fight. I think that makes sense, but obviously for more obvious or less obvious reasons, we know why Dana doesn't want to do that and why Scott Coker would love to do that, because I think he has a little bit less to lose when it comes to the even just the status of maybe Bellator and like the how they're regarded in the world. But I don't know, it's weird. It's funny that they're getting into these discussions because that kind of gives me hope that maybe one day it will happen, because maybe Dana will be like, okay, let's just prove once and for all that we do have the superior roster. Like he obviously thinks that they do. But I think it's a shame for Coker that Ryan Bader went on to get knocked out and lose his title. He didn't look great, to be fair, either. I don't know if it was that lengthy layoff from not cutting weight to 205. But Nemkov did look great, though, and I think I would like him, although I haven't seen too much of him, and I think that was probably his first maybe test at that higher level. I think he does pose some threats to that current light heavyweight division over in the UFC, especially with John Jones leaving. But I think it's definitely an interesting debate, and it's fun as well, especially what they did. I think ESPN done it where they just matched up all of the champions. I think it's an interesting topic of discussion for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's a conversation to be had, and obviously, was you almost a bit surprised, Jay, that Dana bit on this weekend? Obviously, he got asked the question, so we had to answer it, but almost bit and said, right, that's cute, but you clearly haven't, because we've given you most of your talent in that division. So what do you make of it? And is that almost Dana immediately closing it off, or is it him being like putting the feelers out there, saying that maybe in a year or two, let's put it to the test?
No, that's Dana White just being Dana White. Like that's as long as Dana White's the president, I don't see that ever happening. I believe if the only time that could happen is if someone else came in and took over Dana's role. But while he's in charge, that won't happen. It's kind of similar to what Arion was saying. Like the UFC have nothing to really gain by beating Bellator in fantasy matchups. You know, like it's everything to gain for Bellator with nothing to lose. You know, so like it's not going to happen in the UFC's lifetime with Dana White in charge.
Yeah, it's almost, especially with Bellator not having official rankings, it's almost hard to go, right, you're number one of UFC versus number one of Bellator. Put them together, see what happens. Obviously, we see what happens between Nunes and Cyborg, and Cyborg went over to Bellator and beat Julia Budd quite convincingly for the featherweight title. And that's probably the closest in terms of matchup, the Nunes-Cyborg rivalry, and that's probably the most enticing to see for a crossover. But again, we've already seen it happen. We saw what happened with Nunes, you know, being the dominating victory there, Arion.
Yeah, and I think the thing with that for me as well is how do you do it? Because if you do just a one-off fight on either promotion's fight card, it's like, okay, so that's just one. There's so many more divisions, you know. So I think it would have to be just a crossover event from top to bottom, which I think that would be hard to pull off because obviously champions and all of the best fighters are staying active all the time. But in terms of the crossovers, yeah, I think I don't want to say easily, because I think Cyborg, even though she beat Julia Budd quite convincingly, I think it wasn't an easy win. I think that, I don't know if that's just a show of the point of the career that Cyborg is at right now and the age and stuff and how long she's been active for, or the fact that Julia Budd was super tough. But I think the fact that Cyborg came off a loss to Nunes and came right over and won that belt straight away kind of speaks for itself a little bit. I think the next interesting one is going to be Corey Anderson, who's inevitably going to get that light heavyweight shot against Nemkov, who looked fantastic against Ryan Bader. So I think that's going to be another little bit of a hint, where each division, I guess, is at between Bellator and the UFC when that does eventually happen.
Definitely. On the flip side, you've got obviously free agent Michael Chandler, who is there still is out there that he could go to the UFC, and that would obviously be a pointer for him. Obviously, you had Ben Askren move over to the UFC. Didn't quite go his way, although he got given some very tough matchups in the fact that he got Robbie Lawler, Jorge Masvidal, Damian Maia for his first 3 UFC fights. Obviously, went into the UFC undefeated. So, Jay, I was thinking maybe you could do it at a Grand Prix. Obviously, Bellator are fantastic for Grand Prix. But if you've got, say, 5 of the best UFC talents, 5 of the best Bellator talents, put them up in a tournament and see who comes out on top in the end.
Yeah, look, and if that was to happen, which, again, like, we are talking fantasy, I guess, but if that was to happen, I do believe, like, I would not be surprised if a Bellator contender won, like, let's say a Grand Prix or something like that, because I think it was Pitbull who came out and said, not all of the UFC's biggest stars came from the UFC. You weren't, like, created by the UFC. Mm-hmm. They're not performance institute fighters or nothing like that. So, like, there's always a case of a Bellator fighter coming out on top, or ONE FC or something like that. We've seen this many times. Like, how many Strikeforce champions came over and took over in the UFC? The WEC came over and took titles. So it could very easily happen. Personally, I do believe the stronger talent is in the UFC. But again, you look at the champions on both promotions. Like Douglas Lima and Kamaru Usman. That's a great fight. Again, you could do Cyborg and Nunes in a rematch. Fair enough, we've seen how the first one went. It went pretty one-sided, but that doesn't happen 10 times out of 10, I don't believe. That could be a great fight. Pitbull and Khabib, Pitbull and Volkanovski. I do believe Pitbull will probably get the short end of the stick in those ones, but definitely make for great fights. So it could absolutely happen. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Bellator came out on top in certain aspects, but I just believe ultimately the stronger talent is in the UFC.
Definitely. And to continue going along that champion path, how do you think, obviously, McFarlane versus Shevchenko would be, or even, obviously, we've got Douglas Lima and Gegard Mousasi coming up for the middleweight title. How would you think they would do against someone like Israel Adesanya, the middleweight champion?
Is that for me or Arion?
I'll throw that to you first, Drew. And then...
yeah, look, I suppose it's only going off the level of opponents that they fight. Sometimes you have to just weigh it up and see how much people kind of thrive in the pressure. Mm-hmm. And Adesanya seems to do that, like, better than most right now. So it would be tough to beat him. But in terms of the Shevchenko one, I believe Shevchenko is the best female fighter in the world, not named Amanda Nunes. And again, this isn't knocks on Cyborg, because at one point Cyborg was the woman, And then, like, fair enough, it didn't go her way against Amanda Nunes, and there's no shame in that. I mean, Nunes has put everyone to the side, Ronda Rousey, Miesha Tate, Holly Holm, Jermaine Durandame, Cyborg, you name it. Like, so, yeah. I just believe Shevchenko is just after her, so I don't see many people beating her. Like I said, I said this before in a couple videos, I think the only real matchup for Shevchenko is actually Amanda Nunes. Again, because it's been so close both times.
Definitely. But getting to the real reason why we're here, we're going to make our own sort of fantasy card as we did last time we saw, or we made up fights that we want to see throughout the rest of the year. But we're going to make UFC versus Bellator fights. Arion, do you want to give us your first fight?
So my first one is in the featherweight division, and I think now this one is probably one of the most unrealistic ones, is looking at both of the fighters and where they are in their career. But I just love this matchup stylistically, and that's Max Holloway against AJ McKee. And my reasoning for it is I love the way Max Holloway fights. I've been a fan of it, and a fan of his ever since he was young, and he had that Conor McGregor fight where I think you could tell at that point already that the talent and the ability that he already had there at that young age was just tremendous. And I think what he went on to achieve, and I think he will still be back probably in that title picture. It was excellent. And I think AJ McKee is maybe showing similar signs over in Bellator, except I don't know if it's due to the level of competition or maybe just how good he is. he's just been more successful than Max Holloway to start off his career, because he's obviously 16-0 and he's in the semifinals of that Bellator featherweight Grand Prix. So I do consider him as potentially the best in that division at the moment, just pure skills wise, and especially with his age and how far he still has to grow. And he's definitely in the top 3 overall for me right now, and just seeing how he's breezing past pretty much everyone that's Coker puts in front of him. And that fight against Arion Caldwell, when it does happen, is going to be fantastic. But I would love to see that matchup between him and Max Holloway stylistically, because they're both fantastic strikers, and they can both mix it up too. And I think it would just be a great war between 2 very similar style of fighters.
Yeah, definitely. That would be interesting to see. Obviously, Max Holloway coming off title losses to Alex Volkanovski. It'd be interesting to see where he goes next. But as you said, AJ McKee in that semi-final of the Grand Prix, he's looked phenomenal so far. And as you said, he's still undefeated. Jay, what's your first fight?
My first fight, my first fantasy fight is Leon Edwards versus Michael Venom Page. Just to, just to see how it goes. It's a battle of the UK beasts at the minute, isn't it? Like, both have been very consistent in their careers. Okay, MVP had that blip against Douglas Lima where he was knocked out, but bounced back quite well. I do believe there's stronger fights ahead for him. Like, I believe he should be fighting higher talent, but that will all come, I suppose. And I think for Leon Edwards, where he's at in his career, he should have had a title shot by now already. But I just think from where they're at in the public standpoint, in terms of like how big their names have grown, I think that would be an interesting fight, and kind of see who's the best welterweight in the UK.
Yeah, that definitely.
Not just in the UK, because obviously they would be huge globally anyways, but you see my point. In the UK, who would stand out above all?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, we had Paul Daly versus MVP in the welterweight Grand Prix. Obviously, it was in Connecticut, so the UK fans definitely missed out on that one. I think Bellator had that on the London card, but it's an interesting one. My first fight does include actually MVP as well. But it's against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I want to see those styles go head to head. Both of them very good, moving around. You got MVP with the hands down, and you got Thompson, who's very good with his distance management. I think that one to me would be interesting. Thompson, obviously 37, MVP 33, so it's one of those ones. And especially Thompson's fought a lot of the UFC, top 5, top 6 already. And he's got a fantastic style, which I think would suit well in an MVP fight.
Yeah, that's a disgusting fight, really. You could imagine that you'd have to have a lot of patience in that fight. It could be a fight that could go kind of the Derek Lewis way, with Francis Ngannou, because both just trying to outdo each other, outsmart each other. That's a very kind of patient fight to watch, I would say.
Yeah.
What Jay said is the sole reason I'm not picking Wonderboy for any fantasy matchups in the foreseeable future.
He knows how to either put the pace on, or he knows how to manage that pace very well. Jay, we'll flip it back to you now. What's your second belt of your fantasy background?
I don't know if this one's a fantasy one anyway, but I'm just trying to match them up when we're going through both rosters. But I would say Sinead Kavanagh, representing Bellator, against Sijara Eubanks from the Ultimate Fighter. I just believe both will be. I think it would be a bit of a brawl, really. Sijara Eubanks came off the Ultimate Fighter, has a couple of fights off. Obviously, has a bit of an issue making weight sometimes, but I think it would be a good matchup for Sinead Kavanagh to see how she matches up against some UFC talent, and then we can kind of go from there. But it was only a light one just to see how she goes and how she fares. But I'd like to see her start fighting some UFC talent. I would actually prefer if she got a UFC contract rather than Bellator, but whatever makes her happy. Fair play to her, but that would be a fight I would like to see for Sinead, particularly.
Definitely,
Don't be laughing, Arion.
I think it's absolutely incredible how you went through both rosters and you picked out that as one of your fantasy matches.
Yeah, well, look, fantasy or not, but it had to be picked.
You do need an injection of Irish talent as well into the UFC. You're a little bit
This
light.
is what I'm saying.
You could do with that. Arion, what's your second belt?
My second one is a welterweight fight between Gilbert Burns and Douglas Lima. And I just love that one. And I think it's for a similar reason that I liked Max Holloway against AJ McKee, is that they're both so dynamic and just crazy on the feet, even though they're also so well decorated on the ground, as they're both black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I think that kind of a fight is just it's just crazy. And I think it's very likely that both of them will be champions in the near future. And obviously Douglas Lima already is, and Gilbert Burns, I think, has a very good chance of doing that against Kamaru Usman. I really like him in that matchup. And I think that would just be incredible. I think that kind of a fight is fireworks. And I think Gilbert Burns has shown over his kind of, outbreak this year that any fight that he gets put in gets entertaining because of his fighting style. And he's not one of those, guys that will just rely on his jiu-jitsu and try to human backpack you and submit you. He wants to trade. He outstruck Tyron Woodley. So I think that just shows his credentials. And we know how good Douglas Lima is and how also brave he is as a fighter as he's going up in weight now into middleweight to try and contend for that belt. So I think in terms of an out-and-out matchup everywhere, I think they balance each other out so well. And I think that would just be a great fight to see at some point down the line.
Now, I presume, is that for the Bellator title or is that a UFC non-title belt?
I mean, right now it's non-title because Burns isn't the champion. So I think I would just put them in there and just let them go at it with no belts on the line.
See what happens, definitely. My second one, we're going for the featherweight division. I want to see Julia Budd versus Felicia Spencer. Obviously, Felicia Spencer is number one in the featherweight rankings, probably for the UFC, despite there not being an actual official featherweight rankings on their website yet. But I'd like to see Julia Budd come over to the UFC. I think the featherweights in that organization does need a little injection of talent there. Despite Nunes, she's going to fight Megan Anderson at UFC 256, I believe, for the title. But we could do with someone in there, and the fact that she's only got 1 or 2 fights, I believe, left on her contract. She lost the title to Cyborg. Maybe it's time for her to come over, test how good she is, and also find out how good Felicia Spencer is as well.
Yeah, well, I think these things need to happen, don't they? Like, there's certain fighters, like Julia Budd's name has been kind of bouncing around for a long time now, and I think she's only been short of having that UFC career, so it would be kind of worth her while to be tested over there and see how she fares again against what I believe in terms of the women, definitely the stronger talent lies in the UFC, so it would be good for her to test herself over there.
Also, just to add on to that, I really like that notion of what happened with Ben Askren and Demetrius Johnson, that trade kind of a thing that is so popular in other sports. Obviously, in football, it's transfers. In America, it's trades. I really do like that, and I think if the UFC are serious about building that featherweight division for women, you're not always going to be able to poach fighters from other organizations without giving anything in return. So I do think that the UFC roster is so big. And there are fighters, I think, in some divisions that would do better in another promotion, whereas UFC could benefit by bringing in some better talent for that 145 women's division, for example, if they were to maybe do some sort of swap deals or something like that.
Definitely. Especially if you see some, I don't want to discredit her, but Holly Holm, she's done everything in UFC. Maybe you bring her into Bellator. It's a huge name for Bellator. And again, another competitor to really bolster that featherweight or bantamweight division if they want to strengthen that division too.
Yeah, it'd be good to have her rematch Cyborg for the title.
So we move on to our third and final bout each. Arion, who's your third bout on your fantasy fight card?
So for my third one, I tried to slide over into the women's divisions in both and just see what kind of makes sense the most. I think that I was trying to be the most realistic in that one, and I took a look at Valentina Shevchenko over in the UFC flyweight division, and then Ilima McFarlane over in Bellator, and I just feel like they're both pretty much on a similar level in terms of they're just pretty much untouchable in respective divisions. I don't think Ilima had any problems since her career in Bellator began. She was just kind of going up. She's still undefeated. She's a very dominant champion, and I think when it gets to that kind of a point at a fighter's career, as she's at right now, even though she's still relatively young for a fighter, I think you just run out of options because she just keeps clearing out that division, and we don't really know her true, I don't want to say potential, but maybe like her true level, or where she is regarded in that global women's flyweight ranking. So I think her against somebody like Valentina, who also is not really challenged in that UFC flyweight division, like she's making very respectable contenders look amateurish with how easy she's putting everyone away, and the names just do not get better, do they? And with all due respect to Jojo Calderwood, but in terms of like the pull power and the status of fighters, since Nunes, she's just been going down in ratings and pay-per-views and all that stuff. So I feel like when you get to this point where Valentina just doesn't look like she will ever lose at 125, and where McFarlane is at over at Bellator, where she's just destroying everybody that Scott Coker puts her way, similarly to AJ McKee, as I said earlier. I think that would be a nice one to see how Valentina performs, and she would be a huge favorite going into that one, I think, quite understandably, and to see how vslimaLeith fares against arguably one of the greatest of all time and the greatest flyweight that the UFC probably has ever had.
Yeah, definitely. You know, vslimaLeith McFarlane, she's stormed through most of the competition that she's had in recent times, and it's become one of those that are fun to watch as well. She's probably come, you know, she's in that upper echelon of Bellator talent where she's, you know, got a big name for herself now in a fight against Valentina Shevchenko with one that would be very interesting to see. It's probably the second most or third most fight that you probably pick to watch out of the potential crossovers for champions. And I think it'd be interesting to see where McFarlane would then suit in the top 5 of the UFC, because, as you said, you've got Joanne Cordell within there, Jennifer Meyer, Cynthia Calvillo, Jessica Rai. Those sort of names would be very good for McFarlane to test herself against. But there's no one better to test herself against other than Valentina Shevchenko right now. Jay, you prepped us and got us excited for your third one. Said it's pretty excited. So do not let us down now. What's your third fight?
Well, that second fight really got you going, didn't it? So I will have Sean O'Malley versus James Gallagher. I think that's a little hint on the Irish thing there for both. But I think they've also had a very similar career in the sense of, you know, two very young prospects, you know, both predicted to have really bright futures. And then if you look at their career, it's kind of similar. Okay, O'Malley has a couple more fights on his record than James, but as well as UFC experience, but, you know, sometimes that just doesn't matter. You know, they've both taken a loss, and we'll have to see how O'Malley kind of comes back from that, although he's had a higher profile fight. But, you know, James Gallagher, since he's lost to Ricky Banderas, again, he's just kind of cut through people, hasn't he? So I do think that would be an interesting fight to see. You know, it's a test for both, you know, and again, it's a fight. Like if O'Malley won, let's just say, there's no damage to James Gallagher's stock because time is on his side. He can always get, and knowing how James trains, and like he's just 365 days, he does not stop. So it wouldn't worry me in the slightest for him. And vice versa to Sean O'Malley. I do believe he's kind of made from a similar cloth where he just wants to get better. And again, like he's only young in the sport. He has nothing but time. So I think it'd be a great matchup for both. They're both at the same. I know Gallagher's had a couple catch weights around 140, but I do think if they both met at 135, I think that would be a very, very interesting fight. Because although they're both cutting through talent, well, O'Malley was up until his recent fight with Chito Vera, but they're both also very different in terms of Gallagher is just a submission specialist, and O'Malley's, you know, so slick with his striking. It would be a great fight to see, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And we're still waiting to see Sean O'Malley. You know, we know or have been told that he's got such good ground game and so good with his jiu-jitsu game as well. As you said, a submission specialist in James Gallagher would be the perfect test for him. And as you said, both of them very young. It would be interesting to see what happens at the press conference. I think there'd be a few back and forth between the two, because both of them like to talk. And I think that belt does, you know, especially if you put it in Ireland, that free arena, you're selling that out pretty quickly in the main event.
100%. It sells, you know, like you said, the trash talk would 110% be there. You know, they're both very marketable as well. You know, so it's essentially a money fight for both. You know, it would do mad numbers, I personally believe. You know, both, like O'Malley's stock's just risen since the Contender Series. He became a huge star off that. And for James Gallagher, especially in Europe, everyone knows not a lot of people like him in terms of personality, you know, but sometimes people just have to give respect to his ability inside the cage. And the man goes in there and wins every time. So, yeah, I think that would be tremendous.
Yeah, I think obviously Sean O'Malley, his stock rose enormously. I think it's still there, but there's a lot of people almost not turning against him, but questioning his ability to take the loss. You know, he's come out and
his heart
about it. And, you know, a lot of people have been going, just simmer down, take your loss, you know, be humble about it. And that might turn it against him. And it might have the point where you've got two heels going against each other, which is always fun to see.
Yeah.
Definitely. My third and final one, we've heard this name mentioned previously, is Paul Daley versus Leon Edwards. As you said, you wanted Edwards versus MVP. I want to see Semtex versus Leon Edwards in the welterweight division. I think, as you know, both Midlands guys, both. I think this is more of the passing of the guard fight, and as you said, it'll probably be one of those to test out who's probably second best in the UK. So I think Darren Till's number one, and I think Leon Edwards is probably second, but a fight against Paul Daley or MVP, and a win for Edwards would certainly certify him as the second best in the UK at the moment.
I just want to see Leon Edwards fight again because it's been a minute and he's hung around the top of that welterweight ranking in the UFC, but it's like it's getting to this point where it's hard to give him a number one contender or a title fight because we just haven't seen him in that long. And it's obviously not always his fault because the circumstances and stuff didn't let him. But yeah, I do like that as a matchup, and I think to kind of maybe sum this whole debate up, it's like we will never really know how far or how close the two promotions are in terms of their levels and status and whatever, because these fights are probably never going to happen. And I think until they do, especially when it comes to like the higher echelon fighters in every division, I don't think there is that much between all of them. You know, like I don't think if 5 of the best featherweights and 5 of the best featherweights from each promotion fought, I don't think it would be a clean sweep either way. I think, like Jay said at the start, you wouldn't be shocked if a Bellator fighter beat a UFC fighter if it was the 2 top 5s fighting. So I think these fights just need to happen for us to be able to see which is truly the greatest, because I think right now the UFC is just a self-proclaimed best promotion in the sport because we just don't have any maybe level of comparison other than the fact that UFC just pulls in huge numbers.
Well, yeah, they're the primary promotion, aren't they? They're the top dogs simply because of, you know, just how big they are. They've always generated good stars. They've put the machine behind certain people to create worldwide success for certain fighters. Like, if you can generate, you know, numbers like a Conor McGregor did or a Ronda Rousey, you know, like Bellator don't even do pay-per-view. You know what I mean? You kind of see why people sway across the UFC. But again, like you said, there is talent in Bellator. And it's not just Bellator. You know, it's in the PFL. It's in, I was going to say World Series, in ONE FC. You know, like no matter where you go, there is world-class talent there who could walk into the UFC and beat serious UFC contenders. So it's just the way it is. And like Arion said, you know, we do kind of need to see these fights in order to have a definitive answer. But again, we're just doing fantasy right now. So that's the hard part about it all.
Yeah, I think it's a fair statement to say that all the champions in Bellator would easily get into the top 5 of the UFC rankings, and it's just there where do you start placing them. It'd be nice to see that Bellator do have rankings, but as you said, the UFC is so far ahead. It's almost like comparing the NBA to any other sort of infrastructure, I guess, because everyone goes to the NBA so knowing this is where the best players go. But even then, and Arion, you probably knows a lot more. You've got, you know, Spain, you've got some of Eastern Europe bringing through talent as well. So it's becoming a level playing field. But the infrastructure, I saw today that Dana White's actually bought some more land in Vegas to build a UFC hotel, so the fighters don't even have to travel from the PI. They can just get into the UFC hotel, be in the PI, be at the Apex. So he's building a whole infrastructure around that one company, which you don't see anywhere else.
Yeah. It's very, he reminds me a lot of Vince McMahon. You know, the two of them are just, I think they're the two best promoters in the world. And I honestly do. I would put Vince at number 1 because he can sell a predetermined product to millions of fans, like all across the world. But Dana White, like he's just, you know, you've all heard the story about how they were like in debt drastically, then to the Ultimate Fighter to where we are now. Like, and you have to look at it and see, like you said, the Performance Institute, even the Ultimate Fighter show as a whole, and then the Contender Series, Fight Island. He just doesn't stop, you know. He's relentless. And I think if Bellator could find someone who said, right, we don't need to copy their model, but we need our own, you know, our own stamp on things. Yeah, and then you might see some changes. But I think UFC will always remain the top promotion until then.
Definitely, yeah. Go on, Arion. Was you going to say something?
I just wanted to comment on the Dana White thing because I think credit has to be given to him, and I totally agree with everything that Jay said about the 1 and 2. And I think the common notion, I think, is, and most people would agree, that it was McGregor who brought the UFC as an organization into the mainstream. Like, you know, that people who maybe have just no interest in fighting whatsoever will go to a bar or will pay pay-per-view because they just want to see this guy who talks all this smack fight. But I think credit has to be given to Dana because he kept going, and those numbers starting holding up on fight cards that didn't involve McGregor going forward. And right now, the UFC got noticed by ESPN, who are the leading sports kind of broadcasting station in the world, you want to say, with just how big America is. They got noticed by them. They signed up for a deal, and those pay-per-views are doing numbers now, and Conor McGregor isn't even in the picture. So what Dana White has been able to do, and just how he just kept grinding, and what he's able to do now, other promoters are just not able to do. Like how UFC is operating as normal, even though there is nothing normal about the current circumstances. It's just hats off to the guy for the work that he's done, and for what he's done for the sport of MMA, because from where the UFC came to where they are now, where like it just keeps growing, and you have more and more people getting involved in debates online and stuff. It's crazy, but it's great to see all the same.
And definitely, you know, as much as the UFC as the bar hold or the bar set, should I say, the more they advance forward, the more the rest can then come up as well, because all the talent filters down, all the money filters down. So we do see the rise of Bellator, ONE FC, PFL. They all do get that little bit more notoriety, and especially, you know, PFL is on ESPN as well. You've got Cage Warriors on Fight Pass, and I think the Vince McMahon thing is very fair to say, because obviously you had WWE Network, and even then they were the first. Well, they continued pretty much throughout this whole pandemic, didn't they? They went back to taping the empty arenas. Now they've got the Fandom, or the Thunderdome, I believe it's called. And you can see the UFC followed that similar model with the UFC pay-per-views. You know, so you've got your fight nights every week now, the UFC Fight Pass, and then, you know, you've got the WWE Performance Center and the UFC Performance Institute. It's very similar models that they're working with. And that's even then transcended down to matchroom boxing with Eddie Hearn, who's just, you know, called a fight camp, which is one of the biggest, you know, attractions to boxing right now.
Yeah, and it's backyard. Like it just makes people want to kind of keep going. Like when you see someone like a Dana or a Vince, and they're just making moves and they're not taking no for an answer. You know, it does motivate some people. And like you're saying, like Eddie Hearn has publicly stated that he was what's the word?
Yeah.
I say motivated then by Dana White and what he was doing. You know, so he knew he needed to get the show on the road again. You know, we can't just sit back and wait for this to all blow over, because we don't know when it's going to blow over. You know, probably 2 months, 2 years, who knows? Like, it's crazy. It's crazy times we live in. But the UFC, they just keep going and they keep rolling with it. And, you know, like Dana said, he was waking up every day and there was new rules changed and stuff, whatever else. But he always had to keep finding solutions, and he did. And credit to him, because, again, like you said, like other people are starting to follow suit. Now you're seeing Bellator back. You know, okay, Bellator probably didn't check in with the UFC for that 30-page book that they got on how to do it, but they definitely took note of what they were doing and figured out how to get back on track. You know, and we're seeing smaller organizations doing the same thing. The WWE is still doing it. Like you said, Matchroom are having shows in their back garden. It's crazy what you can do, and I think ultimately credit goes to Dana White and the UFC staff for that.
Definitely. I think that's almost a perfect place to wrap it up. Firstly, put your comments down below. What are your fantasy matchup really? UFC versus Bellator. Who do you think comes out on top, the UFC or Bellator organizations, of course? And lastly, Jay, Arion, where can they find you? I'll start with you, Arion. Where can they find you?
So my Twitter is just my first and last name. I'm sure it's going to be on my name, or the @ is going to be on the screen, so you can come over there and.
Otherwise, talk about like United at the moment as well. Hoping Sancho signs. All three of us have got hopes, and obviously Balance MMA and United equally. Jay, where can they find you?
In a pub somewhere. No, yeah, you can find me on Twitter at J_Farrell1. Number 1. No words. I have to keep explaining. I don't know why. So we'll just have it appear here somewhere. I don't know.
Should be on the screen.
And you can find me there.
But no worries. Thank you guys for joining us to the MMA debate. We're going to be doing.
What about you, Mitch?
Hey, my name's there as well. Make sure to follow. Also, make sure to drop MMA Latest a follow on Twitter and Instagram, of course. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 10K. Hopefully, we're getting there soon. Only 100 left to go. And, we've got all the events coming up. Maybe a return to Fight Island, of course, coming up at the end of September, October. And obviously, Adesanya Costa, could be Gaethje, who, again, World Series of Fighting champion coming through to the organization. Could he beat Khabib? That would be, another one mark for the crossover, perhaps. But yes, make sure to tune in for the next video.